All right, hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to take a look at ConnectCAD and Vectorworks Spotlight for signal flow and system designs. We're on time, so we'll get straight to it with some introductions. My name is Alex. I'm from CAD Software Direct. We are a Vectorworks reseller based in Essex and serve the whole UK. CAD Software Direct have worked with Vectorworks for a number of years, and we're here to help from pre-sales advice right through to technical assistance. I'm joined today by Tom White, Vectorworks Spotlight Specialist and our speaker for today. I'll pass you over to Tom shortly so he can introduce himself and talk us through the main content of this webinar. There will be an opportunity at the end to ask any questions you might have, and you can of course type questions into the chat as we go, and we'll do our best to answer those as well. This webinar is being recorded, so if you'd like to watch it again or share it with colleagues, you'll be able to find it on our blog a little bit later, and if you're signed up to receive our newsletters, you'll see it there as well. Just before we do begin, I'd like to let you know that both new licenses and eligible upgrades of Vectorworks are currently available at 25% off with 1 year of Service Select for free. Service Select is the maintenance program that gives you exclusive access to new content, expanded access to Vectorworks cloud services, and best of all, a free upgrade to Vectorworks 2021 on release. If you like what you see today, or maybe you're just interested in Vectorworks in general, now is a great time to be looking, and you've got until the 15th of September to get in on that offer. Now, to give you a very quick overview of what you can expect in this session, you're going to see how to use ConnectCAD and Spotlight to generate schematic documentation for installation technicians. You'll also see how to quickly check a system for errors, create the documentation using a mix of 2D diagrams and 3D models for straightforward communication of your ideas, as well as how to make the most of bi-directional worksheets to ensure you're always working on your most up-to-date version of a project. So that's my quick welcome. Allow me to hand you over to Tom to introduce himself and show you how to lay out signal flows using ConnectCAD and Vectorworks Spotlight. So Tom, over to you. I'll let you take control.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Alex. I'm just going to share my screen. If you could just confirm that you can see the Vectorworks screen for us.
Yep, I can see that.
Yeah, great stuff. Yep. So good morning, everybody. My name is Tom White and I'm the industry specialist here at Vectorworks. My background is I was a touring chief electrician and relighter and production electrician for theatre, music concerts, opera. I've been head of lighting at a number of venues. I've been deputy head of lighting most recently at Bath Theatre Royal, and did about 5 or 6 years of international touring. So it was part of my job to create schematics. I use Vectorworks in all of my day-to-day work. I've been using the software since studying at university in 2001, so I've been playing with it for an awfully long time. ConnectCAD is still fairly new to me. It's a great program. It was acquired by Vectorworks for the 2020 release. It was originally a plugin created by Conrad Preen. Vectorworks has acquired the plugin and also Conrad, which is great news for us. So he continues to develop and finesse the software. And as I mentioned earlier, the first things we did in 2020 was we radically edited all the content that came with the program. It comes with a large selection of devices, circuit types, signal types, etc. And we redid most of that stuff with the Vectorworks content team. And it's a really great product, which I hope you'll all see. So as Alex mentioned, please feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we'll endeavour to get to them. Anything we can't get to, I'll take your email address and I'll get in touch with you after the session. Okay. So the ConnectCAD then. First of all then, if you're interested in ConnectCAD, you can download a demo of the software. The demo version works for around 5 days. You'll need to be aware of a few things. Firstly, that when you open the software, the plugin itself works with Vectorworks Spotlight, but you'll need to go into the ConnectCAD workspace. This will be the first step you do. And if you start any new projects from scratch and play around with the software, you'll want to go to File, New, and you'll want to use the ConnectCAD template. Because in 2020, ConnectCAD is unusual in that it has some very specific scales that it requires some of the layers to work at. So unless you use the template file, we worry that you'll get a little bit lost. Okay. So the main premise of the software, as Alex mentioned, is the signal flow diagrams. I used to use a program called OmniGraffle. I used to create kind of DMX patch specifications and media server plugin diagrams, things like that. So there's elements of the software that I'm sort of less au fait with, but the basic premise of it is that you create devices and then you attach those devices with the circuit tools. So first of all then, let's look at some of the ConnectCAD devices. So there's a couple of different ways to create a device. I'll show you the first way, which is using the device builder tool. I just click into an empty space. There we go. So you'll see here, I can look up a particular manufacturer for a piece of kit. I can actually search in here as well, which is good. So if I wanted to look at sort of signal processors or amps for D&B, I can have a look in their folders here. Selecting a model basically means I can then customize the device. You'll notice here it's preset a number of various inputs, outputs, or both. And it's also specifying a signal type. Now those signal types will have their favorite connector. So when you select them, they'll often default to their favorite connector type. And you can also put the orientation of the circuit as well on there. Now you also just create some random equipment, just to give you an idea. The library itself is really vast. We update it every 5 to 6 weeks. If there's a piece of equipment that you think really should be in there, then you can actually just make a formal request to us to create it. But as you'll see, looking at this, it's really, really simple and straightforward to create your own kit. So you simply just specify what you want, the signal type you want it to be, connectors, etc. So the other things I've just mentioned in this dialog is obviously this is a physical device, so I need to tell it what the dimensions of the device is. So that would be top plan X and Y axis. So 600 and then say 200 deep, for example. How many rack units does it take up on the right hand side, or whether it's a half rack width, etc., or whether it's a modular device that slots into another rack mounted device. In here we have power, which would be wattage now, and we also have weight. So by using this, you'll be able to break down reports of weight and power consumption per rack, but also per room. I'll show you some of the rooms a little bit later on. Now, the last thing I just mentioned about this is you've also got the option to place a virtual device. So it may be that your schematic is referencing a piece of software, for example. And if that is the case, you can say, well, this is it starts from this QLab or whatever. So you can specify that. Now, I can create a temporary device, or if it's a device that I want to be stored in my library from now on for me to use forevermore, by clicking OK, it will write that device to the library itself. Okay. More on that in a moment. So let's have a look at the device, just a standard sound card device. We've got inputs on the left-hand side, outputs on the right. All great signal flow diagrams will read from left to right, etc. Let's have a look at how you might customize this. But before we do that, I just thought I'd show you the other tool. So there's a much quicker way. If the device pre-exists in your document, so it's already there, you can use the new device tool, excuse me a moment, and you can choose an existing device. So you'll see here it's got that device that I just created. So here you can work very quickly from a template file and have all of your regular devices in there for ease of use and access. You can also just create a generic blank device, which is what this is. As well as creating a generic blank device, you can customize existing device. This workflow is the same for both of those approaches. So you simply just double click to enter the device, and there you go. You can see the rectangle that we've got there. So this can happen before. You can create devices like this, or you can create devices with the builder and then edit them. So let's add some inputs and outputs. So I can do socket left, for example. Just down here, I can say signal type is HDMI or whatever, and repeat twice. And click OK. So I can add sockets into my device in the same way. I can move them. I can also, just in case you didn't know, in the right mouse click is loads of really useful things like aligning things and distributing things. That's in every Vectorworks workspace anyway, just so you know. I can also customize this with a gradient, for example, or a color fill. I can also, I downloaded an image earlier just for this. So just a little JPEG. I'm just going to drop that onto the device there. Okay. And zoom out and hold down the shift key just to constrain this so it preserves its proportions. And you'll see here that I've now completely customized my device. Okay. Exit device. So it may be that I want to use this again and again and again. So I might want to save this device as a symbol. So if it's a device that you have customized, we just go back to some of the other ones I've got. You can then save it as a symbol, and it will then add it in the resource manager for a later date. Okay, so in terms of creating lots of these, firstly, let's just have a quick chat about the snapping palettes, just so you're aware. These 4 snapping palettes are the palettes I normally use on a day-to-day basis working in Spotlight. I tend not to use Snap to Grid, but in ConnectCAD, Snap to Grid is actually quite important. So I'll just explain that. Snap to Grid in ConnectCAD basically controls the relationship between each device, but also the actual size of the device itself and the size of text relating to that. This is another reason why you should really start from the template file. So when you're creating multiple devices with the Snap to Grid tool on, I'll just get my new device tool. And I'm going to pick a device in the list, as I did yesterday. So I'm going to place these. So with the Snap to Grid function on, you'll notice that my cursor actually neatly snaps and arranges everything. And so it makes creating schematics really, really quick and easy. Now, the other tool I often use would be Move by Points. So with a single device selected, I'm going to use the Move by Points tool. And I'm going to use in the second mode, distribute mode, and let's have another 4 of those. And I'm going to click from the center of this one and move it downwards, etc. So I can create 4. So Move by Points is really good for creating multiple copies of things. You can also hold down the Option key on a Mac and do things like that as well. So you get lots of devices very quickly and easily. Okay, I'm going to delete some of those because they're slightly redundant. Right, so let's take it as read then that we have completed our devices. Here we have just a simple set of handheld microphones and a sound desk. So I'm just going to connect these up. So I'm going to select the connection tool. And I've got a couple of different choices. So firstly, I've got the polyline mode, and it's basically I can click once, make a second click, and make a third click there. Now, when I move these devices, the circuits themselves will remain connected, which is really the main advantage of all of these kind of schematic programs. You don't want to be just using generic shapes if you can avoid it. So straight line is the first one. The second one is rounded. So let's have a look at that. So I can follow that path as well. And then the third one is chamfered. So I deliberately move that somewhere else. So let's say, for example, I wanted all of these cables to follow a particular route. So I can tidy these cables up by using the reroute tool and selecting what I want them to follow. So they change signal type, or they change line type, and they follow a particular cable. So that is quite a useful feature to know about. And we'll have a look at fanning some of these at the moment. Once you've created them, you can change them again, so you don't have to stick to the same type. Arrows are quite useful. So the arrow mode will basically display a piece of text as to what socket it's referencing on the destination device, and it won't display the line until you select it. So that's also quite useful. In terms of all of this stuff, the line types, the text on the devices, the colors for everything, it's all completely customizable. You can have rounded rectangles on your devices, etc. So you can change all of that. That can then be kept in a template file to make it really unique and bespoke and customized to your workflow. So a couple of things just on circuits then. Let's have a look at MultiConnect first, and then I'll show you how you can color and apply different line thicknesses and line types to these. So MultiConnect, it may be that you have some devices which can, you just want to collect, connect outputs 1 through 8 to 1 through 8, for example, and rather than having to do it one by one, you can just use the MultiConnect tool and literally just click once and make a second click as to where you want it to go. Okay, and you'll notice that this has picked out RJ45, so it's automatically defaulted to the correct connector type that's been used. And you'll also notice that the cable itself is a color, but more on that in a moment. So let's look at how you would kind of, it's quite difficult to read exactly what gets plugged into where at this point. You probably have to denote that there's some kind of note on the drawing of how it gets connected. So what you can do, as I mentioned earlier with the reroute tool, you can also just gently sort of fan these out like so. Okay, so this is quite a nifty tool for just editing the appearance of these lines with 2 different modes. So the first mode, it follows another circuit's path, and the second mode means you can select multiple cables and just gently fan them out, which is nice. Okay, so these signals then, so you'll notice that they automatically colored themselves in. Okay, and you'll notice that if I change the signal type over here to be they change their appearance. Okay, now the way this functions is that, let's say for example we wanted to use a new signal that was completely unknown, unheard of, whatever, new one. You'll notice now if I go to the classes dialog in Vectorworks, the organization. So just as another quick recap on this, the main things we're interested in to organize a document in Vectorworks are classes and layers. Design layers are where those items live. So ConnectCAD is unusual because obviously it's a schematics package. It's not, you're not designing a house, so you're not designing a show necessarily. So you're going to have a different design layer structure in here. What I've decided to use is each one of these is a separate individual schematic. The classes then, so if a design layer is where something is, the classes are basically what those elements are. So if I search for new one, you'll see here that Vectorworks, or rather ConnectCAD in this case, has actually created a new class for me to use. So as soon as I've entered text into that signal field, it's written a class in here. So I can just say edit, right, wherever this is, wherever I've used this as a circuit type, please make them all have a orange line that is a particular thickness, or could even be a line type, for example. Okay, and you'll notice, okay, that they now all change. So this can be done in your template file. It is possible to merge classes between documents, which is quite interesting. So say you've got some signal types that you really like from another drawing somewhere else. When you're creating new classes, you can actually choose another Vectorworks file, and you can then actually tell it which classes you want to pull in. And then by merging those, you'll merge the appearance of your circuits, which is quite helpful. So if I just, I'm just going to delete these again very quickly. Very quickly use the MultiConnect to get the right type of circuit. And then we're just going to look at numbering. So ConnectCAD has a couple of different numbering systems available to it. Let's go with settings. So you can apply these numbering systems by default. You can edit the XML file that they're actually coming from. What I prefer to do is that because this is basically exists within the Spotlight product, you can add elements from the Spotlight workspace that are really useful, such as numbering. And so I can select my cables, and I've added the Spotlight numbering command to the right click. So I can very quickly and easily say Spotlight numbering, right click. Let's number these. Prefix would be ET, starting at 1 from the bottom to the top, for example. Okay, there we go. And you'll notice that it's numbered all of these. It's again, there's class control for all these labels as well. So that's how I prefer to work. You can just use an automatic numbering system, but I just think I want complete control of how I number things. Again, it's really important with ConnectCAD that everything has a unique name and a unique number. It's really crucial so that when you run your reports later on, it's referencing the correct things, and you can't have things with the same ID, etc. But you'll throw up an error anyway, which is fine. So then, we looked a little bit at numbering. There is, as I mentioned earlier, we created lots of different signal types for this particular schematic, and there is a legend tool as well on the left-hand side. There is also a hopover tool, which I don't believe I showed you, but I mean, in an ideal world, you would draw a schematic and you wouldn't need the hopover tool, but you know, it does happen. But you know, just so you know, that is there. Okay. Other tools in here are where you want to place. I mean, most of my work just involves ConnectCAD devices. If you want to look at things such as tie lines or BNC or etc., any particular patch panel elements, or even DIN rail connections from electrical circuitry, RCD protection, etc., you can place just customized panel mounted connections straight onto the document as well. And there's obviously a terminator if you want it, and you can loop in and out of a particular device should you want to display that. Okay, so where do we get to? Right, let's have a look at the schematic that we have created. So here's one I made earlier. As I said, I customized a lot of these devices. I have deliberately not included some work, also deliberately put some things in incorrectly, just as a way of testing ConnectCAD to see if it can pick up the errors, etc. So in the default right click for ConnectCAD, there's a check drawing command. You can also do check drawing. And what I'd recommend when you do this for the first time, because it took me a while to learn how to do this, I would recommend you do each of these in turn. So you check the drawing for sockets, and that's just going to check that all the sockets have got a separate ID, etc., and they've all got the correct signal type that can be associated with the connector. Devices would be names and numbers, etc., and circuits are all numbered. So I would actually recommend you doing them all one by one. But I've done this before, this demo file, so that's fine. So OK. And you'll see here that it's actually created some geometry and markup on the actual layer itself. It's telling me that you can't plug a USB-C connector into an Ethernet port, Tom. It just won't work. So it's obviously flagging that up. And it's also picking up down here that the USB output on here, which is going to a Thunderbolt, but it's also picking up that that's not a standardized cable and I may need a piece of hardware to go in that gap. Now, you don't have to put up with all of these marks on your drawing. Once you've finished fixing things, you can just right-click, clear the markup, and that's just going to tidy those up. Okay, so we've created a schematic for a kind of simple theatre or conference presentation audio playback system, a QLab system, a main and a backup. It's a Netgear switch for the sound designer to remote into those two other QLab machines. And there's some, so we'll just have a look now at the next step. Once you've created your schematic, we go to the rack elevation layer. Now you'll notice that this layer is at a different scale. Okay, this is fairly important. So this is where you want to create your rack elevations 1 to 10. And it's just how the ConnectCAD devices are designed to generate themselves, basically. But as I said, if you start from the template, you'll be fine. Now let's go over to the second tool set. Now we're in this separate rack elevation layer. We'll go to the layout tool set. So the first thing we want to do then is we want to define some rooms that our equipment is going to go in. I interpreted this with my background as the ability to create a room that is, for example, SL stage left, or another room which is FOH, for example. So it's simply a way of you assigning which equipment is actually going to end up in which room. This is only important when you want to run a report or worksheet at the end of the process that then breaks down what equipment has got to go where, for example. Okay, here's my room. There's just the layout room tool. It's literally draw a rectangle and give it a name. You can't have a room within a room, unfortunately. But then the next level of organization really will be your rack. So we'll have a look at that. Before we look at the rack items, so here is a room I've created. Now, on the schematics layer is all of those devices and equipment. The quick way to do this, to get all of the devices into the rack elevations layer to put into the racks, is to run this command, okay? So make the devices from the list that you've got. Now, I've chosen to just do this separately so you can see how it works. I'm basically using the equipment item tool, and I place them on the design layer, like so. And you'll notice that they just say name. So it's currently just a placeholder piece of equipment. This is, I just need to give this a name. I did this demo yesterday just to check everything's fine, and it's picked up the name. So I'll just make it a bit more realistic for you. So there's not cheating. So here's my piece of equipment. As soon as I call it FOH desk, it then picks up a load of information about that particular piece of equipment. So it now understands it's Yamaha CL1 and how many rack units might take up. I probably want to use the faders if you want more than that. But I now have a piece of equipment that you'll notice as I pick it up and move it into the room, it's now located at front of house. Now, interestingly, if I were to go back to the schematics layer, select the front of house desk, that would tell me it's in front of house. So the information, the data syncs between the rack elevation layer and the schematic layer, and it syncs purely by the name field. That's how the equipment knows which piece of equipment it's related to. So the next step there, some of the equipment into racks. So you would then position a 2D rack in a room. There is a 2D rack tool, which I'll just show you. You can basically give it a unique name, tell it how high it is, standard width and depth, etc. Would you like to limit the power consumption in any way? So if you do that, then you can do some spreadsheet formatting later on to dictate whether your allotted devices are not going to go over the power supply unit for that specific rack. You can assign a weight for the rack, etc. Is it standard opening or is it wider? And obviously it will pick up its room. Now, the way this functions, those devices that I showed you, a little bit later on, we're going to drag and drop them into here. But ConnectCAD rather cleverly also generates a 3D model of the rack. Okay, and the way that it does that is using the Rack 3D tool, which you can just place into the document. And with the Rack 3D tool, you'll notice that you then have got the choice to choose which of the racks you want to link it to. And in doing so, you will then basically get a 3D version and a 2D version of the same rack. And as you update the 2D with devices, it will fill up here as well. Okay, so I've also got the ability to put doors on things, etc., open panels out, and display text as well. So quite useful features in there. So let's now have a look at the schematic that we did earlier. I started slotting some of the things into our racks. I've got my 2D rack tool here. So we've got the backup QLab machine, which is just a little Mac Mini, and the primary QLab machine, and there's some power supplies there. The sound cards, primary and backup, Netgear switch. So it's simply a case of, I'm just going to add the UPS now. So I'm just going to drop that into there like so. Move it up a little bit, go on. Okay, and then I'm going to pop the other UPS in. Batteries running a bit low on my mouse. Okay, so I've basically got my assembled rack model here. So if we have a look at this in 3D, you will notice that this is basically referencing this. So if I now remove pieces of equipment from the rack, it actually removes it from the 3D model. So this kind of workflow makes it really easy to create schematics of this, and well, not just schematics, but drawings. So we can have an isometric view. You can have a front view, for example, so the installation engineer knows what goes where. You can see, you can put individual rack elements, and you can have a side elevation. Now, in order to create that, there's another useful tool I should show you. I use the ClipCube tool for making section viewports. It's really good. I would really, really recommend you having a play with it. It's hidden away down up here. So in this bottom triangle menu on the right hand side, you have the show clip cube. That's essentially puts a little teapot that's cut in half. So with that, I can select an item and then select the teapot. And then I can use this to section through a model if I want to. But I can also use it. I can turn it around. I can also use it to create really nice viewports. If I was to right click on this, I can select create section viewport, looking through the rack on that side. So that's a really, really useful tool, Spotlight tool really, but again, as you can see, it's got a lot of uses in ConnectCAD itself. So you can create some really lovely schematics in here, and obviously you can add measurements and dimensions in exactly the same way that you would normally. So you know, this dimension tools and everything work in the same way. Let's have a look at the schematics. So again, this is sort of Vectorworks' equivalent to Paperspace. It's called sheet layers. You can present your schematics on here. And then finally, we have the worksheets, which are linked to the software itself. So you'll see I'm just presenting these at the moment. You can export these as PDFs as well. You can also export them as CSVs and open them in Excel. Interestingly, I haven't quite played with it yet, but you can also export this as data. And then you can get the engineers on site to change it. So let's say, for example, I've already done this in this file. I've taken what should be the first output and I've made it to the last. So just to explain some of what we're looking at here, we've got the numbers, there's some missing information. It's got signal types, circuits. Now, SRC, that stands for source. So that understands that in the stage left room, there is a stage left playback rack. These are the rack keys that it's using, the device name, the source socket name. Over on the right-hand side, it's then telling me the DST, which is the destination. So destination rack, destination that I use. Now, for example, I think a lot of you will probably only have 3 or 4 fields in this worksheet. So you can customize this, you can delete columns that aren't relevant, etc. So you can then update the patch in a spreadsheet fashion that you're used to doing. Now, what's really interesting about ConnectCAD is that when we then go back to the schematics, so the engineer comes back from being on site, has their spreadsheet in, and it's always an effort, you know, to draw the as-built schematic. How did you actually assemble it? But what ConnectCAD will enable you to do is it will say, right, let's have a look at your spreadsheet and let's just compare the two. So here I can do compare the cable list and the drawing, and ConnectCAD will tell me all of the current differences. So it's picked up some information that I've missed, but it's also importantly picked up that the engineer has plugged output 16 into, input 16 into output 1. So it's going to pick that information up. Now you can also, as another tool you can also do with this, is if you don't have any circuits in the ConnectCAD drawing, you can get ConnectCAD to draw the connections as well, which is really, really useful. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the end of the ConnectCAD presentation. I hope I haven't missed anything, or it's fairly comprehensive, I think. Now might be a good time, Alex, if there is any questions at all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, thank you for that as well. I hope you all found that interesting and learned some things along the way. I know I did. As Tom said, if you've got any questions, you should be able to see a questions panel on your screen. So yeah, feel free to ask anything you'd like to know about ConnectCAD or Vectorworks, and we'll do our best to answer them now. We've had a few come in throughout. So first off, Tom, would this be suitable for someone designing an office plan, or is this focused on entertainment?
It's absolutely suitable for that. So, yeah, it's a good question. So I would say it's probably more suitable for Ethernet infrastructure and network infrastructure, purely based on the devices that exist. So within the device builder itself, you will see there's loads of things like Draytech, Netgear, things that I wouldn't necessarily know much about, but in here I'd say it's largely Ethernet-oriented. Interestingly, Conrad's background is in AV, so he did broadcast cameras, etc. But it's yeah, so it has got a number of uses, but I would say yeah, it's definitely well suited to that. It seems to be that a lot of customers that we've got at the moment are doing sort of anything from home cinema installs to office meeting rooms, and yeah, and like you suggested, Ethernet networks in an office building itself.
Okay. All right, we've got another one as well. Is it possible to share a project with a colleague, and are you able to work on it together?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Older versions of ConnectCAD, you were able to link devices to other Vectorworks documents, but there's this really great feature that actually exists in the design series software called project sharing. I can take you through some of that. Before I take you through the project sharing, let me just show you where ConnectCAD keeps its things. So the thing to be aware of before you start project sharing is you will need to all have access to the same devices, okay? So and the same connector types and the same signal types and the same cable. So there is actually a folder that gets created in your applications folder. Here we have 2020, a folder called plugins, and the folder is called ConnectCAD data. So if you are commencing a project sharing project with your team, make sure everyone has the same text files which get created by the program in their particular user folder. That means that everyone is not going to throw up any errors, basically. So what is project sharing? So if I just say this is something else for a moment, so I don't overwrite my demo file. So on the desktop. Okay. So if I go to File, one second. Keep forgetting I need to add it to the white space. Keep forgetting to do that. So project sharing, it basically creates what we call a master project file, and it saves it to a Dropbox or a server location. And it's called a .bwxp. There's a couple of different protocols that you can use. It's best to speak, if it's a server, if it's Dropbox, probably use SMB. If it's a server, I'd speak to your IT team. You just click next. Now, at this point, you could save and finish and let everyone on the project open the file. And then the next time you come to this, I'll just manually create one so we can see what happens. The next time you come to this, you'll then see a list of all of the users who have opened the file in the background. So the project file exists on the server or the cloud, and everyone opens that file, but in doing so, it creates a working file for those people. So no one can remove or destroy the project file. So once you get everybody's name in the list, well, you can then assign different responsibilities and exactly how much they are allowed to do within the project. It's always good to have more than one admin so you don't get locked out. Anyone joining the project from scratch, I would make them read only, just so that if people decide to open that file, they're not then going to make themselves an administrator. Interestingly, the color on the right-hand side, as they're drawing their geometry live, that is the color that their geometry will appear when they basically go File, Save and Commit. And so what that basically means is that you can kind of see what other people have recently done on the actual design layer in that color. After another save and commit, everything will revert back to its proper color. So it's just a kind of so you can see what's happening. You can lock individual layers out as well. So if there's a specific layer that you don't want anybody to damage, like the venue survey or whatever, or the office building, you can lock that out. You can specify the backup location as well, etc. And in terms of how it works, as a general basis, if you want to obviously move things, it'll say, oh, you need to check that stuff out, but which can be quite dull. So the way we encourage people to use it is to say, right, I'm doing stuff on this schematic layer at the moment. I don't want anyone else to do it, so I want to check that out. So Tom is updating this. So you can leave little messages for your colleagues in here as well. And then people try and work on this layer at the same time as me, they'll get a little note saying you can't do that because Tom's reading this. So now I can freely move stuff around as I want to. And then once I've finished, I can then go File, Save and Commit. Save and Commit basically sends all of my changes to the project file, which then in turn sends the changes to everyone else's working file. If I've made a mistake, I can simply close and I can release any layers or items that I checked out. So it's a really, really powerful tool, project sharing, and it just means you don't get that age-old problem of, oh, you really need to do something on that file, but so-and-so is doing stuff on that file, and I have to wait for them to finish, and etc. So it's definitely something worth doing a bit more digging on. We have a number of things on the Vectorworks University about project sharing as well, if you've got any other questions about that. Hope I answered that, Alex.
Yeah, no, it sounds like good stuff to me. Okay, there don't seem to be any more questions at the moment, so hopefully that means that everything's been covered, and it certainly seems like it has. So as mentioned at the start of this session, we're going to have this webinar recording on our blog later. You'll see it in your inbox as well if you're signed up to the CAD Software Direct newsletter. Also, as a quick reminder, just before we leave, before the 15th of September, you can get a new license or upgrade of Vectorworks at 25% off. Plus, you'll get 1 year of free Service Select, which does include that upgrade to Vectorworks 2021 as well. So that's everything we have today, unless there's anything you'd like to add just before we go, Tom?
No, that's great. Just if you're looking for more training content, then please do check out the Vectorworks University, and we've got a number of essentials training seminars running at the moment, so have a look out for Vectorworks events online that you can join. That's it.
Absolutely. Okay. So if you do have any questions, you can find our contact information on our website, cadsoftwaredirect.com. Please feel free to send us an email or give us a call, and we'll be happy to help. So thank you all for being here. We hope to see you next time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thanks, Alex. See you all soon.
Thank you.